Welcome back to the Root Cause Podcast, where today we have a very special guest who talks all things mental health and overall personal well-being of anybody in the agriculture industry. Alrighty, y'all, we are back for another episode of Root Cause, and today I have our returning guests, Caleb Dinwiddie, and a new face, Kacee Bohle, out of Indiana. Tell us about where you're from.
Yeah, middle of nowhere. I always say, I'm the state next to Illinois. We're about 3 miles inside of the state line of Indiana, west central side of the state.
Okay, so you are a fourth-generation farmer?
That's right.
So what are y'all's crops? What's your rotation look like?
Corn and soybeans.
Okay.
Yep, every other year. Yep.
So
No animals?
None right now.
But in the past,
My husband's been building a chicken coop for about 2 years, so maybe one day we'll have chickens.
Okay, all right. But what about in the history? You used to have hogs, I'm sure.
Before I was born, my parents,
years.
they had cattle and hogs, but not since I've been alive.
Okay.
Something happened in the 80s, something like that.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yep.
So growing up on a farm, you've gotten to see firsthand the struggles of farmers on a daily basis, correct?
Yep.
So what is something that you noticed growing up? Like what was a specific example for you?
I mean, it's all over the place. I mean, I wouldn't say we are a large farm by any means, especially compared to some other growers that I work with. But I think the constant struggle is there's so much that you can't control. And so you just kind of winging it and you're just being reactive to everything.
Okay, so tell us about yourself, your business, and how you transitioned from growing up on a farm to the leadership role that you're in now.
Yeah, so fourth generation row crop farm. I always thought I was going to be the one that came back. I'm one of 4 girls, and my dad kept trying for a boy. He's like, one of these days I'll have a son. And after 4 girls, he's like, okay, I just can't risk having another daughter.
Yeah.
And so I was the one that was like, okay, I'm going to go back to the farm. That's going to be my role. So I went to school, got a degree in agriculture business, and came back and realized this is not necessarily what I thought it was going to be. So I worked on the farm, and then I also got a job at our local John Deere dealership. And I did that for a couple of years, and I was just like, man, this is not what I thought adulting or life should feel like. This is not what I thought my career was going to look like. I was exhausted, and I remember working during harvest, coming home, jumping in the auger cart, working until the beans got tough or whatever, and I just did that day after day after day, and I was like, this is exhausting. And so I eventually applied for a new job, worked for corporate John Deere, and that took me into my professional career, and I did that for about 15 years, and I just really found an issue with every job I had. I was a career job hopper, and I just was like, okay, maybe it's the product, maybe it's the people, maybe it's the company, maybe it's a location. I kept finding something that was missing. I just couldn't name it. And I was like, I just got to go do some internal work because maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the problem. And so I read a lot of different personal and professional development books, took a lot of courses, and I'm like, why doesn't anybody talk about this, especially within ag? And so that just kind of sparked this interest for learning. Like Caleb was saying earlier, I didn't love school, but now all of a sudden I've found this desire to learn more, especially about myself. And so I took all this information, and I'm like, how can I apply this to the industry? Because there's a big gap here. And so that's ultimately what kickstarted me and turned it into a business, and I've been doing it full time for a couple of years now. So that's really what started it all for me, was this personal need to fill eventually.
There's all kind of ways to improve your agronomy skills on the farm.
Yeah.
All kinds of different, but how you run the business, there's not a lot of great tools out there, is there?
No, I mean, I was talking to a farmer client of mine the other day, and he's like, my company's put me through sales training. They put me through, all this stuff, but nobody told me about how to hire intentionally. Nobody told me how to have these conversations with my farmhand around, they're getting a divorce. How does that affect their job and how they're showing up? He's like, I don't know how. I've never been equipped with resources or tools to handle this stuff. So that's kind of where I come in.
Yeah. So one of our big things as a farm, we just hire you and we expect you to have the same, work ethic and drive that we have as owners. And this is not the case. So that's a big thing on how we get people to do that. And I was visiting with a family up in Pennsylvania who has grown a huge business, bigger than their family. They're Amish. and they're hiring people, and they're like, okay, so now we've got all the problems you've got because we're going outside the family. And I thought, wow, that's a big leap for somebody who is in such a controlled environment of quality. So, yep.
So at what point do you think going from job to job to job is where you realize the mental health imbalance that farmers lacked, like the focus on it?
Yeah.
When do you think, what was that experience like?
Well, I think the majority of my career, I've always worked with farmers and ranchers, and I found like even when I was selling seed or I was selling farm software, we'd meet at the kitchen table. That's where business was done, and we'd get done with doing the business part, and I'm like, so how's everything else going? And they'd be like, oh, well, and then they'd just kind of like open up. They didn't have anybody else to talk to, right? The people that most people see on their farm are trying to sell them something. So I became this like kitchen counselor, and I'm like, don't you have somebody to talk to about this? And they're like, no. And so I was like, yeah, there's a real need here.
That
Kitchen
should be your name,
counselor.
kitchen counselor. I love that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I asked you earlier about what did your family deal with as stressors, but overall, out of all the farmers you work with, you work different states. It's not just your area. What is the common denominator between all farmers that's stressing them out right now?
Oh, man. It's hard to pinpoint it down as like, this is the thing. But again, I think it's just they don't know that they have control over this, right? They think, okay, I can't control the weather. I can't control the markets. I can't control XYZ thing. It's like, but there's a lot that you can control, but nobody's ever taught them how to take inventory of that. Nobody's ever taught them how to say, okay, here's where I'm going to change and make, some action here. So I would say the common denominator is just maybe they don't feel empowered because they feel like they're under somebody else's thumb all the time.
And it's it's a crop season. It's not a weekly report. So you got to go through a whole year to see the results, to see what kind of change you want to try to make.
They can't see instant gratification on anything.
No.
It's delayed.
And it's so delayed you forget what you did. So it's that's a big part of it. Yep, that's astute for you to pick up on that.
So you brought up the term instant gratification. I feel like the lack of farmers getting that immediate feedback, where in most other jobs, you're going to win a deal like, oh, it's great, here's your bonus, whereas farmers don't get that. And I feel like that leads to farmer burnout. So what is a warning sign for farmers who are going down that path of possible burnout? What do you see?
I mean, it's so hard because everybody experiences burnout in a different way. They show signs a little differently, right, depending on your personality type or what the culture is that you're in. But some of those signs of burnout are, I thought I enjoyed this at one point, and now maybe I'm not enjoying it anymore. But I think that the signals can be crossed because it's like maybe you're good at something, but that doesn't mean it brings you joy and energy, right? And I think that farmers especially, they've done this their entire lives. And so they've gotten really good at it, but does it actually light you on fire? But you're so far in it. You've been doing this 30, 40 years. It's like, one, maybe don't know anything else. Two, maybe this was something that your parents put you in. And so you didn't know you had options. And so it's like, well, I'm too far gone now. So I might as well just keep riding this out. And so they're burnt out, and then they get resentful, and they're full of guilt, and they've got strained relationship, and it just ripples effect into every other area of their life. And so it's hard to pinpoint exactly what, like here's the symptoms, but at the end of the day, if you're not feeling energized, if you're not feeling like you enjoy the things that you used to, or, loving on the people that you used to love on, start taking some inventory and seeing like, well, what's the root cause of that? You like that?
Yeah.
You like that?
That was
I do.
smooth. So, but like basing off of that, in agriculture, toughness, resilience, perseverance is so celebrated. But any weakness, any ask for help is like kind of frowned upon. It's not like frowned upon, but behind the scenes it is. Like it looks weak. So how do you help farmers overcome that mindset of, okay, I need help. What do I do?
And I don't always think it's we don't want to ask for help. It's one, we don't know how, and two, where do we ask? Who do we ask?
Yeah.
There's not really that person who you can ask as a farmer for mental health advice or balance and your work and home life. I mean, that's just not something that's as talked about in the farming industry.
Yeah.
So speaking of burnout and different things like that, so stress mentally impacts farmers, different things like that. Why is it critical to address that before it escalates, before it gets bad?
It's important because, man, life is so short.
It is, yeah.
It's so short, and I mean, I work with people in agriculture, but I mean, this is gonna be ringing true for everybody. It's just not worth it to let a day go by carrying negative mindsets and negative thoughts, actions that aren't serving you, right? And so if something's just not aligned, if it's just not jiving, it needs to be taken care of, because it may be too late, like let's just say you're stressed out. You take it out on those you love the most. My poor husband, he gets the brunt of it, right? And let's just say I don't make it home tonight, and I left that last conversation on edge or strained. It's just, life is just too short. It's so important. It's just not worth wasting the very short amount of time that you have on this earth unhappy and drained and just not experiencing all that life has to give, because it's worth experiencing.
So what are some strategies that you tell farmers about to help balance this work and daily life balance?
Yeah, I mean, again, this isn't cookie cutter. It's going to look differently for everybody. But some of those things that I always like to point out is I think that we've thought or assumed that healthy balance is putting 50-50 or 100 and 100, like you're pouring into all the things all the time so you don't drop the ball, right? Whereas a healthy work-life balance is putting the right amount of time, energy, resources, attention into the right things at the right time. And so knowing that farming is seasonal, mostly, it's going to look different from day to day. It's going to look different during the spring months as it is the summer. And so just, again, checking in with yourself, the very first step is just being aware of it. Maybe you can't change it. Maybe it's something that you can't make adjustments overnight. But at first, just starting to just take awareness around, like, what does this look like for me? And what do I want more of? What do I want less of? And again, that's going to look different for everybody.
So it's hard for you and what you do to create these plans, because like you said, not everybody's the same. It's not cookie cutter. So how do you go about that? Like, how do you go about drawing these, I don't know if you would call them business plan strategies for each farmer? Like, how do you go into a meeting?
So here's the difference between coaching and consulting. And I think a lot of people interchange these terms, these roles, where a consultant is somebody who's partly responsible for the outcome. A consultant does part of the work or all of it, depending on the agreement, whereas a coach is not responsible for the outcome and not responsible for the work. A coach is somebody who's there to provide resources, to guide, to be the person in your corner and empower you to do the work. So that way you can take full credit. And so I don't build plans for people. I walk them through and help them, and I ask really great questions, and they build the plan that works best for them, because they're the expert in their life, not me.
I like that. I like how you're all about supporting them to get there. You're not wanting to take any credit, like, oh, I helped with that. Like, that is all on them. Mm-hmm. I really think that's a different shift than what we're used to.
But in your experience, the farmers you work with will open up. Yeah. And they're yearning for that ability to have that person talk to.
Yeah, and I mean, I always set the expectations, right? Let's just say I'm in a call with a client and they're like, I need you to really help me build this. And I'll say, okay, I'm going to take my coach hat off and I'm put my consulting hat on, and we're going to do this work, and we'll sit down and we'll do the work together. But again, I always like to manage the expectations, because it's not my place to build this out for them unless the expectation is very clear. Because again, you're the expert in your life and your farm, not me. Now, there are experts that you hire, like consultants or agronomists or whatever, that can come in, but that's not the role I play.
Yeah. So put on your coaching hat and help me figure out my new hobby. I need a hobby.
Okay.
So how do we do this? So many of your clients probably are workaholics, don't have a hobby, don't have a real small knit group of people, a very repetitive kind of day flow. Mm-hmm. So So help us farmers, us boring farmers, develop hobbies.
Okay, so this is kind of like, I don't know if you know this, but I was an auctioneer for a little while. And anytime anybody was like, oh, sell this to me, right? Like you put somebody on the spot and you're like, sell me this cup, sell me this pen. It's not really how it works. But I would say if there's something you're like, okay, help me find a hobby. I'll say, do you want a hobby? Do you want one?
Well, that's not fair. I said development. I do, but I don't know what it would be. I tried fishing. Terrible at that. Terrible. I can't putt. I could hit the driver, but I can't putt. So I'd have to have somebody to go hit the irons and putt for me. So I'd have to have a team to golf. I'd have to have my own team. So I don't know. Yeah, I want something, but I don't have a clue what it is.
You want something, but is it a hobby that you want?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, well, that's the work that we need to do, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where we would dive in. I'm like, why do you feel like you need a hobby right now?
Because I don't want to become 75 and not have developed one and be bored.
Did somebody say you needed a hobby? Or is that just something that you said, I want this?
Oh, I just think I might.
Okay. Well, what gets you excited?
Yeah, I know. So personal development, reading, that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
Yep. So as long as I keep my vision, I'll be good to go. But now we got Audible, so I can listen to what I can.
So are you listening to Audible now?
Oh yeah.
So you're already doing the thing that you wanted to do.
I know, but it don't seem like a hobby.
Well, what's the definition of hobby?
I don't know.
Well, that's where I would start.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Let's set the expectation, right?
All right. Well, this coach hat's real over here.
It is.
All right.
It is.
Get in the game, huh?
But talking about that, like that mindset shift that farmers, like, so they're more fulfilled. Like that was the perfect example. Like, what are you seeing? Like, what is this is a farmer, yes, but like in your farmers that you deal with daily, like what does that shift look like? Like, what do they need to do?
To do what?
To be more fulfilled in their work and their daily life. Like he was talking about how he wanted a hobby, but he already has one, but he just doesn't realize that it is.
Yeah. Well, I think that we have a lot of noise telling us this is what your life should look like. This is how you should feel. This is what you should be doing in your business. This is what your house should look like. This is the clothes you should be wearing. This is all the things.
Oh yeah.
So much dang noise. And it's so hard for us to put our blinders on and ask ourselves, what do I actually want? Not what does my spouse want, not what does my parent, want from me, what does my boss want from me, but like, what do I truly want? And again, especially as a parent, what are my kids wanting right now? Because I've put myself on the back burner for so long. And especially if we're kind of staying on the theme of speaking to farmers here, what are other farmers doing? What does their farming operation look like? How are they raising their crops? And it's just like, what's working for you though, right? What works for you guys down here in Tennessee on your land and your weather is not what's going to work in Indiana.
Yeah.
The same thing is said to be, for each individual person as well. What works for me is not going to work for you. So take some time, put your blinders on and really ask yourself, what do you want?
Yeah, no crop is the same.
Exactly.
So no year of your life is the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep.
So farming's unpredictable. Things never go, we've had this conversation plenty of times. Things never go to plan. How do you prepare farmers and like what skills do you try to get them to learn for this kind of situation?
Again, I'm not making the decision for them. I'm not saying, hey, you need to go learn this skill. It's where are you at right now and where do you want to be? And let's together figure out how you need to get there. And maybe that is a new skill. Maybe that's a mindset shift. So again, it's going to look different for every single client of mine. But I would say communication is probably the biggest thing because we've talked about our mental health. We've talked about our operations. And so communication is that number one thing that I think is lacking because what if we say the wrong thing and we make somebody mad and we have a strained relationship? What if my communication is misinterpreted or, whatever. So, skill, if we're trying to drill down and really just like label something here, I would say it all comes down to communication. Sharing what you're actually feeling, what you're going through, what you want out of life, how people can support you. Just call it out and say, this is what I need.
Yeah, like I think communication and flexibility is the number one things that farmers have to deal with. And like speaking of keeping a healthy balance of communication, many of them feel guilty if they step away from work and take time for themselves or their home life balances or things like that. So how do they set these healthy boundaries without feeling like they're neglecting their work?
I love this conversation. First of all, I always like to define boundaries because I think a lot of people interchange boundaries and requests, and they think of them as the same thing. So I just want to define the difference here. A boundary is something that you set that doesn't require approval from anybody else. Nobody has to agree with it. Nobody has to say, okay, yes, that's your boundary.
Yep.
You get to decide whether you let somebody cross it or you decide if you let it down for a little while. Whereas a request is you ask something of somebody else and they have the option to say yes or no. And so if you're setting a boundary and you're saying, I am not going to work on Sundays, that is a non-negotiable for me, nobody has to agree with that and you do not have to provide context. If somebody asks you a request and says, hey, can you work on Sunday? You get to say yes or no. So I think that's the very first thing to think about if you're like, okay, I'm feeling guilty about this. Okay, well, let's talk about where that's coming from. Again, what's the root cause of the guilt? Is it because you are letting somebody else down? Is it because you're inconveniencing somebody? Is it because you're missing out on something? Let's drill down and really identify the feeling. And I think, again, we talk about feelings inside of AGRIMINDS, right? Like most people think there's like 10 common feelings. There's over like 300 feelings. So what are you actually feeling? Is it actually guilt?
Or is it is it guilt that you think is guilt, but it's actually another form of it that you just don't know the name for, type of thing?
And my favorite feeling to talk about is the word bittersweet, because we can miss something and still enjoy where we're at too. We can feel bad about something, but also see the positive, right? And so it's like, is it actually guilt that you're feeling? So that's the work I would work with somebody on.
The bittersweet, yeah. So there's a lot of farmers who love their farms, but the business part of it doesn't excite them anymore because there's so many uncontrollables.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It's okay to hate certain parts of your business.
Yeah, it's a job.
Yeah, it's okay.
You should love your job, but you might hate it a little bit too. You know?
I think that's the thing is like, oh, you're a farmer. You must love every aspect of farming. And it's just simply not true. You know, you can love being out in the field and looking at your crops and hate the bookwork. You know what I mean? Or vice versa. You could love doing the analytics, checking the markets, but actually hate going out and scouting. So, I mean, it doesn't mean anything less. It's not your identity. It doesn't mean anything about you. It's just that part brings me joy and this part doesn't. But I know that I've got to work through those parts that don't necessarily bring me joy because that's the whole thing.
You know, as I've been sitting here, you've been coaching and, you know, I guess I like podcasting. What a neat hobby we've developed here. We're getting to meet a lot of people. So
you have a hobby.
Yeah, we're like 7 episodes into this, and just imagine when I'm 85 and Callie's 65, we'll still be podcasting. You know, so yeah. So I was just sitting here thinking, you know, I've developed a new hobby and I didn't even know it. So.
Wow. Yeah. See, these are those light bulb moments that you now have on film.
And I have no clue that I'd be comfortable doing it, but I really enjoy it. It's great. You get to meet a lot of people and talk about, all these important things that matter. So
it was one of those going out on a limb ideas of, is it going to be something we enjoy? Is it going to, does it come naturally? Does it bring you that work-life balance, I guess?
And I always love that. It's like, let's just try it on. This world is our playground. There's no rules. And when you realize that, it's like, oh man, like the freedom and empowerment of like, you're right. I don't have a boss. What's the worst thing that could happen? I mean, really, like go through the 7 layers of all of like, what happens if this happens? Just drill down. What is the absolute worst thing that can happen? And every time I was like, okay, well, what if I stand up for myself in my job? Okay, maybe you get fired. Okay, well, what's the worst that can happen? Okay, maybe I have to move back in with my mom. Or maybe I'm going to be living on the street. Okay, is that the worst thing that can happen? And if so, what are the pros and cons to that? You know what I mean? And there is a pro to every single one of them.
Everyone.
Every single one. And when you really drill down and you look at that, you're like, whoa, I do have control over something, and that's me. I do not have to continue farming if I don't want to. I do not have to. There's nobody forcing you to do this. You don't have to tolerate it. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to love it. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah. Great points. This AGRIMINDS stuff might work.
Yeah, I really like this. So we've talked about farming and different, like for the farmer, but what role does the farmer's family and community play in maintaining this balance, like what does the support look like there?
Oh, that's so good. So whenever I do the Balancing Work and Family workshop, I make them go through 11 questions, and we do it all through this Mentimeter so they can see the live results of what's going on in the room. And one of the questions is, do you feel like you lack a support system that understands your work-life balance needs? And everybody's like, mostly. I think I was like, yesterday it was like 40-3 of like, no, I don't have a support system, to yes, I do have people that support me. And it's always so interesting because then I always say, okay, maybe they understand that you have the need, but are they actually supporting it and helping you live out the balance that you're desiring? There's a difference there. And so anytime I'm working with a client that's like, hey, things are out of whack, like what can I do? Again, communication. If they don't know that you have this need, how can you expect them to support you in it? Again, if you don't set and communicate your boundary, you can't be shocked when people cross it, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think you have to first identify what you want your balance to be, what are your non-negotiables. And if you don't communicate that, then of course nobody's going to support you. So communicating that with your spouse, your family, your peers, whatever that is, and saying, here's what I really need. And when you say, this is what I need you to hold me accountable to enforce me, to support me, people are more than likely going to step up and do that.
Right.
But we don't always know we need to or how to, right?
Yeah, so we're also different. I mean, Callie here, she is a excellent communicator. And, you know, it's really, you know, she's been out of school for nearly 2 months now. And, you know, she's communicating a lot. And so I'm not good at it, you know, so it's something else we have to do. And
not good at it yet, maybe.
I know. I just started podcasting, so maybe I can become a communicator.
Yeah. We're working through it.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. So the big question I've really been wanting to ask, and this is where I want you to like highlight you and your business. What is AGRIMINDS? We've referenced it. You've talked about your programs. Like, tell us the whole rundown of it.
Yeah, I'll provide a little context of where it even come from, because that's where it developed. It was a need for myself. I was going through some changes personally. You know, I was climbing the corporate ladder, and then I also became a mom. And so I was kind of struggling and looking for a mentor or a peer group of other people that just got it. And I couldn't find it. I couldn't find, I was specifically looking for women in agriculture of like, hey, how do you climb the corporate ladder within the ag industry while also raising a family? It was really difficult to find somebody who could mentor me or know what it was like. A lot of the women that I knew were much older than I was. And so it's just a different time period of, this is the expectation around raising a family. This is, you know what I mean? It's just, it is different. And so I didn't really have anybody to go to. And so I created this Facebook group online, and it was called the Corn Belt Cadence. And originally it was just, hey, if you're a woman in ag and you just want to talk about professional development, personal growth, join this group. And I had like 400 people join the Facebook group like within a week. And I was like, oh crap. And then I had some men reaching out, and they're like, man, whatever you're talking about in there sounds really cool, but like, can we join? Like, I was like, yeah, come on in. So I changed it from women in ag to just anybody in ag that wanted to talk about personal and professional development. And then again, I was working full time, and I kept having all these people messaging me, and they're like, hey, who do you know that does this? Or do you have a resource for this? Or what are your thoughts on this? And I've always kind of been this person that somehow attracted people to just open up. Like, I could be checking out at the grocery store, and in line, people would be like, oh my gosh. And then they just pour their heart and soul out to me. And I'm like, I've got milk here. I need to get going. It's like, I don't know how it is, but like people just open up to me. And I had that same experience. People were just messaging me and they're just like, hey, I need your help with this. I want to know your thoughts on this. And I was just spending so much time answering all these direct messages. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder if I could monetize this. So I did. And people started paying me money for time on my calendar. Hey, I want to call you and pick your brain about something. Okay, cool. Give me a couple $100. People were paying me for it. And I was like, this is nuts. There's clearly a need for this. People are willing to pay me money to hear what I have to say. It blew my mind. And then I was like, this feels freaking good. Like it filled my cup up to know that I was helping somebody solve their problems or just being in their corner. Because a lot of people don't have that. And if they do have that, they're afraid to talk about certain topics because it may be about that person, right?
Communicate.
It may be about that person, or it may be about a certain thing that other person is financially or emotionally tied to the decision. Yeah. And so they're like, I need a third party that's neutral.
Yeah, somebody that's not involved.
And so they're like, they come to me for that. And I remember one time I was getting ready to go on maternity leave with my second kiddo, and I had a fantastic maternity leave with that company. So I had like 4.5, 5 months off or something like that. And they offered a nesting period. So before the baby was even born, I had a month off. And so during that month, I was like, I wonder if I could build something, some kind of online course or like peer group, mastermind, something. And so for a month, I just kind of like put my head down. I'm like, okay, what are all the things that I would want to talk about in a program that I would, want to condense down and learn about in a very easy, quick way? That's where AGRIMINDS was born. So I pulled out all of my favorite resources and trainings and programs and books and topics that I wanted to know about, and selfishly created the program that I wanted to learn about, but wanted to do it alongside some other people as like a peer group or a mastermind. And the first time I launched that, it filled up fast. I had a full group. I was like, this is really cool. I better figure out how to make this really worth their while. And I had gone through some training for my company, and it was through Maxwell Leadership. So I became a Maxwell Leadership coach, John Maxwell. And I was doing that for my job, and I was like, I could apply this. And so I did it, and it was amazing. I got some feedback, and they're like, here's some things that I think you could do in your next round to really just make this work. And so today it's a 12-week group coaching program. We meet one time a week for 60 minutes as a group, and part of it is coaching. I have a specific topic that I coach on and train on, and then the rest of the time is us masterminding and just supporting each other as a group. So you've got this community to go through this like level of growth that you probably never thought you needed, alongside other people who are also saying, oh my gosh, I didn't know I needed this. And it's just been the coolest thing ever. And it's all tailored to ag. So we talk about the seasonality, we talk about the conditioning, we talk about the culture, talk about the things that people in agriculture face. So I don't really have anything to compare it to because it's pretty daggone unique.
So when you got into this, you were teaching, but you were also learning.
Oh, yeah. And I still do. I like I said, I probably learn more each time I do it than the participants, because it's like, wow, like it's so cool to see the different perspectives. I take so much out of it just myself too.
On a side note, have you read all of John Maxwell's books? And
all of them? Are you kidding?
Like 3,000, doesn't he?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't have enough time for that. I've read several, but thank God for audiobooks. I put it on like time and a half and just really speed through it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm amazed. How does that man do all that writing?
He's amazing. Yeah. I've met him several times, and he's just the coolest person.
Okay, great.
So genuine. Yeah, he's so good.
Yeah.
Unlock your farm's full potential with Profit Max. Gain access to advanced tools and analytics that identify key areas for increased profitability. Work with seasoned professionals who craft tailored strategies for your unique challenges. Ready for success? Start with a personalized consultation at rootcauseag.com. So what is your goal for what do farmers take out of your program? What do you want them to leave that experience with?
Well, I always like to preface, like, it's not just farmers within the group. And I want to be careful about that, because I don't want to put anybody in a box. Like, if you're not a farmer, you can't benefit from this. I would say farmers, ranchers, business owners, professionals within the industry. So it's not just for farmers. But ultimately what I I have an objective for of like, if you could come into this program and leave with like 1 to 2 things, it would be confidence and clarity. Those would be the 2 things. And again, that's going to look different for everybody. Everybody has a different need coming into it. But if you can get clarity around something and you can feel confident in your decisions, my job is done.
I like that. So can you share a success story with us of someone that came into your program and then went out and they may have called you months later and were like, hey, you really helped me. Can you, I don't know if you have confidentiality or anything like that?
Yeah, I probably won't share names because, again, most people in the ag industry, we're so like, I don't know if weird is the right word, but timid on letting people know that I invested in myself in this way and didn't put that money towards a new combine or something. You know, like I'm so timid on letting people know that I asked for help or want to invest in myself in this way. And so it's really cool because yesterday I was in Kansas speaking at an event, and one of the gals that was in AGRIMINDS 2 groups ago was there, and I got to meet her in person, which is so rare because I typically don't get to meet my clients in person. I mean, I work with people all over the U.S. I've also had clients in Canada. And so meeting them in person is a real gem for me. And so yesterday I got to meet her in person, hug her in person. I'm like, how are things? Like, update me on your life. And she's just like, here's all the things that we've been going through. She lost her brother-in-law. They're dealing with estate things. And she goes, had I not had these mindset shifts that I went through last year, I don't know if we could have gone through this level of trauma and just
chaos.
So much crap. Yeah, she's like, I don't think we could have made it through that, but they've improved. She was the farm wife that I was telling you about. Like, she runs the books, right? Like, she was able to improve her communication of like really saying, this is how I'm feeling right now, or here's where I'm struggling. Here's what I need to delegate out because I can't handle this part. And so, I mean, it was just so cool to like, that was literally yesterday. So hearing that success story yesterday is super fresh. There was another guy that I had talked to. Actually, this was yesterday too. He was on my way home. And he's like, hey, I just wanted to let you know, I got done typing up my resignation letter. And I was like, oh my gosh, tell me more. And because when he first started AGRIMINDS, which was 3 groups ago, he was saying he was unhappy in his role. And he'd been there for years and he'd climbed his way up. He's really made a name for himself in this business. He's just burnt out. And it's a toxic work environment. He's like, I just don't know what to do. And I'm like, well, what are our options here? And he's like, I think I just need to leave, but I'm so dang scared. Like, he's so close to retirement. He's like, can I start over at, 50 something years old? Can I start a new path this late in the game? Like, yeah, absolutely you can. And so he's just like, I'm going to lose out on some benefits, but I think it's worth it for me to fulfill myself, know that I'm doing something for me. And even though I'm losing out on some options here, it's the right thing for me. And so he's just like, I just want to let you know, had I not gone through AGRIMINDS, I wouldn't have realized this in myself, let alone have the confidence to make a decision, have my back on it. And so that was really cool too. I could go on and on. There's so many things. Like, one guy said, like, you saved my marriage. Because we go through some trainings and he's just like, no wonder my wife is that way. Like, now that I understand that that's how she is, it makes so much sense. Instead, I was like thinking this about her, but now that I understand that, it's like, whoa. So, I mean, it's just, I could go on and we probably don't have enough time for all the things. It's such a rewarding thing.
No, but I love it because farming is a lonely profession, and it really is. And it just shows that your job is given these. I'm not saying you're a therapist for farmers, but in my head, that's kind of what I resonated with. Like, yes, you're a coach, but you listen to their problems and you give them critical feedback that they really need. So, like, how do you help hold them accountable and like to further through with their plan? What do you do?
That's such a good question because AGRIMINDS is a 12-week group coaching program.
Yeah.
I'm not around after 12 weeks. Now, I do have several clients who become one-on-one clients with me after the program. So the accountability can hang around a little while. But again, I'm not going to be around forever. I don't want you to depend on me. I want to give you the tools, equip you with the mindsets and the resources that you need in order to hold yourself accountable or find somebody who's going to be around maybe long-term. Maybe it is your spouse. Maybe it is a peer group in your community. Maybe it's a peer group online. Who knows? But who can you put in place in your life that can hold you accountable to that level? I would love for you to continue to pay me forever to be your coach, but I don't want you to depend on me. I want to empower you to put the things in place in your life that you need long term.
But that shows who you are as a person of like, of course you want to make money. I mean, I feel like everybody, that's what everybody
That's not what
chases
it's about though for me.
But you are the type of person that's like, yes, I would love for you to stay with me forever, but I want you to be able to be okay on your own. I really like that. And I think that shows a lot about who you are as a individual, coach, consultant, whatever you want to be for that day. So once they complete the program, what happens? How do they continue implementing what they've learned long term?
Yeah, that's a good thing. So everybody gets recordings of the program. I always say like, okay, this is going to expire after a year, but I've never taken any of them down. So they could probably access the recordings forever just until my cloud gets full. But they get the resources and the tools. So I give them a workbook that they have printed out. I also give them a lot of different resources and links online and just different things that they can have with them that don't expire. But I do have a couple of options. Again, I've had people take the program twice, which is crazy to me that people are like, okay, I loved it so much, I would do it again. But it's really cool because they thought they were coming into the program for one reason. And then about week 3 or 4, they're like, oh crap, I better start paying attention. This is really good stuff. And so they want to go back through it and pick up and experience the first couple of weeks where they didn't go all in on it.
Yeah.
And they're like, I need to go through that again. Or I didn't quite get it the first time because I've never been exposed to this kind of stuff before. I've never thought about this. I've never needed to do this level of work or growth. And so I want to go through it again to just really experience it. So they can go through it again as many times as they want. But again, a lot of people turn into one-on-one coaching clients that we do 3 or 6 months coaching afterwards. And then I've been trying to pull together, this is like the first time I'm speaking about this publicly, but I want to pull together an in-person event for alumni, if you will, of people who've gone through the program and do like an AGRIMINDS summit. But it's just not, that takes some time to plan out. And I want to do it right.
Yeah. If you're going to do it all the way.
Exactly.
I totally understand. So tough question. Where do you see the agriculture industry headed long terms when you're talking about mental health, stress management, and just your overall personal well-being?
I think we're heading in a good direction. And I know so many people have this negative victim mentality, but I'm seeing some really positive things. I mean, this topic and the things that we're covering today is becoming more common. I wouldn't say it's normal to talk about it, but it's becoming more common to talk about it in our industry. There's more tools and resources, more support for people in our industry. So I'm optimistic, and maybe I've got rose-colored glasses on, but I am optimistic. And I was actually on a podcast the other day of a senior in college. It was her like project for a class. She's created, I think, 10 episodes of a podcast. And so she interviewed me, and she's just like, what would you tell people in our younger generation? And she kept talking about, you know, our generation, we went through COVID, and so we like missed out on this, and this. And I was like, you got to stop doing that. You cannot hang on to that. It was crappy. Everybody in the world was affected by this, but it's not the first time this has happened in humanity, and it won't be the last that we have some kind of big crisis. Yeah. You got to move on. Every single person, whether it's in our farming operation, whether it's in our personal life, maybe you lose a sister 3 days after you get to have breakfast with her, you know, but like everyone's going to go through some sort of crap. You got to move on. I'm not saying forget it. I'm not saying don't learn from it, but you can't stay there.
Yeah. You're holding yourself back if you just remain stuck in place. Mm-hmm. No, I really like that.
Yeah.
So one final question for you, and this is a tough one. Through your program, through your interaction with these farmers, growers, businessmen, women, whatever, what is one question you die for them to ask you and you never get asked?
This is such a tough one. I would love for more people to ask, what can I do now? Like, how can I keep going?
And that's a tough one for, like, once you get out of a program like that, you're like, oh, I've got all this information. Like, I'm going to go.
I want you to use it. You've got the tools. Yeah. Now, what are you going to do with them? And that's always the thing is, like, people are like, okay, cool, thanks for all this. And I wish they could say, like, how can I keep learning? How can I keep growing? Because if you're not growing, you're dying. And I just wish more people would ask themselves that question of like, is the thing I'm doing right now hurting or helping me? I wish they'd ask themselves that. They don't need to ask me, but I wish they'd ask themselves those questions.
So yesterday I had an aha moment, and I forget what I was watching, but on Sundays, my phone does it. I assume the world's does it. Tells you how much screen time
Weekly
you have.
screen report. Yeah. Oh, the worst.
Yeah. So last week mine was 38 hours. So what if I had spent 8 hours just focusing on those important things?
What if?
Yeah. So
what would look different for you if you did that? Just play around with that for a second.
Yeah. So I'm much on being coached. Yeah. So I had a lot of good things yesterday. It's scary when you sit back and say, wow, what a waste of, not all of it, but I'm sure over half of it's a waste. And so that's even more, more time, yeah, I don't know.
Here's a tough one. I'll be vulnerable with you.
All right.
I have mom guilt quite a bit. I've got 2 kids. I got an 8-year-old and a 2-year-old right now. And my 8-year-old is very much so like, can you read to me before bed? But he's also at that age where he wants to stay up late. Like he's a night owl, and I'm a 70-year-old woman. I want to be in bed by like 9:30 max. And he could stay up till 11 and be fine. So, I was like, okay, do you want to read tonight or do you want to stay up a little bit later? And he always picks stay up a little later. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to read to you then. Well, then, of course, it's 10:30. And I was like, okay, you got to go to bed. Like, I'm falling asleep over here. He's like, okay, well, can you please try to read to me tonight? And I'm like, you picked stay up late. And so I always say, like, no, I'm tired. I want to go lay down. So I don't read to him that night. Well, what do? I go in bed and I'm scrolling on social media. Next thing you know, an hour goes by and it's like, and this always hits me and I always feel bad about it because it's like, I need some me time. Sometimes I need that hour to wind down of just not having kids need me, And so I don't always feel guilty about sitting there scrolling, but my 8-year-old's going to stop asking me to read to him at some point. And so could I have taken that 15 minutes to read to him or, go in and scroll? And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, Caleb. I think there's no black or white. It's just these are the choices that I'm making today. And again, make the decision and have your back on it. There's no right or wrong, but my 8-year-old's going to grow up and he's not going to ask me to read to him at one point. That day's going to come. I'm not going to beat myself up over it because I do need Kacee time, but is 15 minutes going to be the make or break? Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not.
So there's a better way to spend your 15 minutes.
Yes. But again, there are some days where I'm like, oh, well, right? Yeah. I can't beat myself up for not reading to him tonight. I'm not going to do it. I cannot let that eat me up.
Yeah.
Can't do it.
Yeah, it's too short.
It is. But I think that shows who you are as a person, as a mother, as a businesswoman, when okay, this is where I got to draw the line. Like, it's been a tough day. Obviously, you sound like a rockin' mother. Like, you just sound like an overall good mom. But just for you to have that thought, like, dang, he's not going to ask me that forever. Like, a lot of parents or people wouldn't take that into consideration. But being able to balance that, your time versus family time versus work time versus all that, I think is crucial in just daily life.
Well, and I know, because, again, we homeschool. I've read to him all day. All day.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I didn't even think about that. You told me that earlier.
He is with me all day.
See, that just totally slipped my mind.
So I do feel guilty about it, but at the same time, it's like he's not lacking my attention. It does not sound like he is. So I don't always feel guilty about it, but it does cross my mind. And it's like, okay, I can't let that happen. I can't just guilt trip myself. You do deserve an hour of scroll time if that's what you want to do with your time. I'm not going to beat myself up for it either. So if your screen time does come back, there's a lot of good stuff online that you can learn, right? So don't beat yourself up over it. But it's like, is that how you want to spend your time? You get to decide that.
Yeah, so this guy his big point was if you do that for your whole life, that's like 30-something years of your life scrolling.
Mm-hmm.
That is crazy.
That is crazy.
Like would you say 38 hours?
Well, 5 or 6 hours a day, I think is what my phone showed. So
that is crazy because, that adds up to a whole day. Quick.
Yeah. And so
brain turns into
But we
mush.
also, like, let's take it into consideration that a lot of that's work calls, work emails, work texts. Like, a lot of that is work, too.
Yeah, you can validate it.
We counted the other day, and Caleb had over 100 and something phone calls in one day, and I was like, I'll be turning off my phone if that starts
she was
happening.
only 18 of them. She was communicating.
See, I'm a good communicator. Overly communicate, but a good communicator. Okay, well, this conversation has been so amazing, and it's been different than ones we've had in the past. Like, I really like how we went down the mental health hole and not just overall like agronomy or just farming. Like, we went to the topic that's not normally discussed, and I'm just so grateful that you made the trip down here. Like, I know it was not a short, easy journey, and you did drive it. But I want to thank you for coming on. And Caleb, I want to thank you for being here again.
Yeah. Just like the podcast here, we've been doing a lot of agronomy stuff, carbon, this, and this. But, the whole mental aspect of what we got to do, your game face, it's the root cause of what will be our circumstances. And so yeah, thanks
And
for coming.
Not talked about enough, but I'm glad you're bringing awareness to this.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. And I'll leave you with this is, I hired a business coach several years ago, right before I was starting my own business. And I was also a wreck emotionally in my personal life. And again, postpartum depression, all the things I was struggling with and trying to find who I was as a mom, as a career person. What am I going to do? And she goes, your business is going to fail. And I was just like, I did not pay you this much money for you to just call me out and tell me my business was going to fail. Like, I hired you to make sure I had a successful business. And she goes, well, your head's not on right. And she just called me out. And she said, it is a ripple effect. Your mindsets that you have about your personal life are going to show up in your business. And I just think that is so true. And I think, just think about it as a farmer, right? Like, if you have a money mindset, scarcity mindset in one area, or a victim mentality in one area, it's going to show up all across the board. It's a holistic thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you don't sell your crop for enough, it was because you were spinning out of control somewhere.
I am not saying that.
Okay. All right.
I am not saying that.
That'd be another podcast.
That is another day.
Yeah. All right.
Alrighty, y'all. Well, thank you. Thank you for telling us and farmers and everybody else how to take back control and control the controllables and what you can do.
Yeah.
But thank y'all both for joining in for another episode.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Kacee Bohle. You can find me on Instagram and LinkedIn at Ag Coach Kacee, and learn more about AGRIMINDS visiting kaceebohle.com/AGRIMINDS.